Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm gonna be showing you all of the books that I've read in the first half of 2022 and giving you my own review and my ratings on a scale of 1 to 5 of each of the books that we're gonna walk through together. If you haven't been reading for a while and if you wanna get back to reading, I think it's generally safe to pick any one of them from these 10 books. As of my own rationale of reading a book, starting from 3 stars, I think it's generally a very interesting read. I had a lot of fun reading it from cover to cover, or it has some educational purpose, you know. And starting from 4 star, I think it has everything that a 3-star book has, but it takes it to another level, meaning it's super fun to read, super entertaining. And you know, starting from 4 star, I would start recommending these types of books to my friends, to my family. You know, so I actually had a lot of 4-star books in my list today. Starting from 5 star, this has to be something that is mind-blowing and transform the perspective of how I think about specific things. And I want to be a little bit conservative because I know that 5 star is the highest rating for books. I want to save those 5 stars to those ones that I really like and I would pretty much recommend to everyone. Starting from number 1 is The Atomic Habits by James Clear. You know, I've heard so many good comments on the internet about this book, and this book actually came out quite earlier in 2019, 2018, I don't know. I finally got a chance to read it, actually not read it, I listened to the audiobook version of this book and I absolutely liked it. It's actually my first time listening to an audiobook and the experience was actually quite good. On Goodreads it has a rating of 4.38 and my own rating is 4. I think the book tries to solve a problem for a lot of people who struggle with execution. You know, they have ideas but they cannot put them in action. They find it hard to build habits. And you know, what makes it stand out from all of the self-development books is that this book in particular is so easy, so down to earth, so practical. My favorite standpoints from the first few chapters are the ones like focus on the system instead of the goal, and how, you know, habits help build your identity. So instead of trying to form a habit, you should really think about what kind of person you want to be. This book in particular, I think the value I got from this book is that it makes forming habits a thing that is very intentional and is very strategic as well as tactical. It helps me build a very comprehensive and practical framework that I can easily adapt to my life to form good habits and break bad ones. So, you know, when I was reading the book, you know, I thought it would be fun to actually start forming a habit while reading this book. So the one that I picked was actually listening to the audiobooks. It talks around 4 steps of forming a habit, which is cue, craving, response, and reward. Like every time you want to start doing about something, these are typically the 4 steps you will come across. So yeah, I would pretty much recommend this book to a lot of people that I know, not just because a lot of people I know really struggle with the execution side of things, but just because this book in general is really good content. Even if you're the get things done type of person, I would still recommend to you. You would find a lot of actionable tips from this book, like temptation bundling, the habit stacking that I talk about, the 2 minutes rule. I also would recommend the audiobook version of it, and check it out and I don't think you'll regret it. Coming up next is On Tyranny, 20 Lessons Learned from the 20th Century. If I recall correctly, this is the first book I read in the beginning of the year. This book is actually coming from an essay, a blog, or just a very short book. It has roughly 100 pages originally, but the fun part of this book is that this is a graphic edition, so meaning everything inside of it has beautiful illustrations. You know, all of the content are also written characters instead of printed, which makes it super fun to read. So coming to the content of this book, you know, 20th century was a dark time. We had 2 world wars, some of the most tragic events in the history, and so many extremely unsettling events. So this book summarizes 20 lessons learned from that dark period of time. So things are like differences between patriotism and nationalism, like what our language means to each one of us and why we should be kind to our language. And lessons like always be investigating before you speak out about certain things. This book, it feels like you're examining yourself under a microscope by yourself. And you can see yourself why in the past you have been acting in certain ways. Not because you truly want to act that way, but people or the mainstream media are putting words in your mouth. I think this is also a great reminder for all of us to be exercising investigation, exercising self-reflection on generally how to be a more individual person. Next one, we have 1984 by George Orwell. Honestly, I don't feel like I'm very qualified to make comments on this book. This is so great and so deep. If On Tyranny is a book that, you know, lays out all of the facts in the 20th century and puts on some self-reflection, put on some alarming words and lessons in a non-fictional way, 1984 is everything in a fictional world, and is probably one of the most famous dystopian literature that you can find. This is also my first time reading George Orwell's literature myself. I'm not gonna spoil the content of this book, so feel free to continue watching. But to oversimplify it, it depicts a dystopia where the government exercises a very an extreme level of control over its people, as well as the organizations of systems or the operations. You know, the mind-blowing part is that the book 1984 was actually written in 1948, just 2 years before George Orwell passed away. It's crazy to think about, because when you're reading this book, you literally feel like this was written based on something that is actually happening. It's so accurate, it reads so real, and even till now it has a huge influence to the literary world, as well as how we think about modern culture in terms of totalitarianism, politics, democracy and stuff. So I'm not gonna make too many comments because I still wanna save this opportunity for yourself to check it out on your own, but this is also my second 5-star book of the year, and I would definitely recommend to you. The next one we have is The Psychology of Money, written by Morgan Housel. So this is probably, if I recall correctly, the only personal finance book that I've read in the first half of the year. You know, the great thing about this book is that when you think about economics, when you think about personal finance, when you think about stock market, you're trying to always game the game, and you're trying to figure out the numbers, the formulas, the everything, and try to figure out the right decision to make at any given point. But a lot of the time they're not about numbers, they're not about being right or wrong, they're just about how it makes you feel. Actually coming at a good time, because we're also experiencing potentially another recession in the history, with the stock market plunging recently in US or in the world as well. So I'm not gonna dive too deep into this book because I had already made another video talking the lessons learned I've learned from this book. So definitely check out that video where I talk about those lessons from this book, and I try to give a very short summary of this book. On Goodreads it has a 4.39 and my own rating is 4. I found it really good. So anyone who is interested in personal finances, to trying to, you know, accumulating their wealth in the future, I would definitely recommend this to you, no doubt. Next book I had over here is called This Is Not Your Company, written by Mike Ronline. He is one of the first few people who are responsible for cultural training during the orientation in Facebook during the period of 2011 to 2017, which makes it super biased for me to make comments to this book because I work in that company still at the moment. So, but this content overall, I find it so good, so insightful. It doesn't have a lot of reviews on Goodreads. It has like 60 reviews on Goodreads, and it has roughly 4-star, and I would give it a 4-star as well, like a solid 4-star. You know, I've always been a much career-driven person. Work to me is a huge part of my identity. If you work in tech companies, it would definitely resonate with more than those who don't. But in general, I think if you think about a lot about career, think about a lot about work, so I definitely would recommend this to you. So with respect to the content of the book, it's split into 3 big sections, which are the relationship between you and your company, the relationship between you and the people around you, who are your manager, who are your co-workers. The last section is about the relationship between you and yourself, how you navigate your career, how you identify your strength, how you overcome failures, or just trying to be the authentic self. You know, speaking of the last section regarding finding the strengths of yourself, this has like a very direct impact on me, because at the time when I was reading this book, I was also struggling with a decision to make whether I should switch team or not, because at that time I was doing extremely well in that team and I saw a very clear career progression path in front of me. But I was, to be honest with myself, I was not finding the work energizing me, and I just didn't enjoy the work. When the reward is high, it's easy to lie to yourself and you can put up a lot of things. But when I was reading this book, I think it really gave me the opportunity to think about things. To be brutally honest with myself, if you cannot enjoy it, it probably doesn't mean if you can succeed at it in the future. So I finally made that team switch decision. To me, this is probably one of the best career progression type of books that I have read in the past. I would recommend this book to you. Coming up, we have the What Does It All Mean? A very short introduction to philosophy by Thomas Nagel. I think it's safe to say this is my favorite book of the year. And I probably should tentatively put it as favorite because I don't think there's another book that would entertain me much more than this one does. This is, like, as you can see, this is very short. This is just 100 pages, I think. Yeah, it only has 101 pages. So my own rating is 5-star, no doubt, but it has a little bit lower rating on 3.64 on Goodreads. I actually wanted to recommend this book to all of you. First of all, it's really short and it's very easy to read. And in general, I think this is a very good book for anyone who is the first time to read any philosophy related topics. And the fun part of reading is that you want to think on behalf of yourself. You don't want to be spoon-fed by the books. With respect to its content, the book is very short, but it has great content. It talks about 9 questions. To me, philosophy is everything but raising questions for things that you take for granted in your daily life. To give you a few examples, the last chapter of the book, what's the meaning of life? What does death mean? What is death? Other few examples like, what is right or wrong? What is justice? And what is free will? Do we have free will at all? I enjoyed the reading, I enjoyed the thought process, I enjoyed the comments from the author. To me, another aspect of philosophy is not about giving the correct answers or giving the answers at all. The point is to raise the question and have the constructive debate. I think this book is really, really great. I would definitely recommend you to check it out yourself. Next, coming up, we have The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson. This obviously was one of the best-selling books in the industry, so it's #1 New York Times bestseller, over 3 million copies sold. I checked it out on Goodreads. Its rating is 3.9, which is a pretty good rating considering it has almost 1 million reviews. It was definitely one of the best-selling books in the industry. But my own rating is somewhere between 2 and 3. My overall impression of reading this book is that when I was reading along the lines, I was like, oh, you're right, I really agree with this. When I almost finished the book, when I looked back on what was left on my mind, I barely remembered anything, which is the problem that I talked previously in the video. A lot of those self-development books are just trying to spoon feed you. It doesn't give you the opportunity to think by yourself. Another reason I would feel that way is because my personality, I'm not a worrier, and I tend to not worry about the things that I don't have control over. So to that extent, what I've been reading in this book, I'm already sort of implementing that lifestyle myself. But I think this book is bestseller books for a reason. In our lives, we just have too many things to care about. We have too many things to give a fuck about. This book is, like it says, is a counterintuitive approach. If you want to give yourself a good life, you need to stop caring about those things who don't actually matter to you. But in general, I think this is still pretty entertaining read, to be honest. So if you're looking for something that is not that serious, definitely check it out yourself. I think it'll give you some thoughts on how it would improve the quality of your life as well. Next one, we have Letters to a Young Athlete by Chris Bosh, who is 2 times NBA championship and 11 times NBA All-Star. Pretty solid. And I found out this book because I watched Chris Bosh's The Hall of Fame enshrinement speech in June last year. And I thought it was such a good speech. And you know, the way he delivered the content, he delivered the lessons he learned, he delivered all the past experience in the league. I was pleasantly surprised that he was such a, not just a great player, of course, but a great speaker and a great writer as well, like turned out when I was reading this book. It doesn't have that many reviews on Goodreads. When I was writing reviews for this book, I originally put it as 3-star, as a solid 3. But later, when I finished the review, I thought it deserves something better. It deserves a 4-star. You know, reading this book just reminded me a lot of good time spent on basketball. You know, even though I stopped playing basketball ever since college, reading everything from an athlete perspective is just so refreshing. I mean, this book summarizes a couple of lessons, a couple of topics from Chris Bosh. And it was great to learn the mindset of a great player, how they communicate on and off the court, in the locker room, their physical wellness, as well as how they care about mental health as well. And I would definitely recommend this to you. If you're in general interested in checking out, you know, the sports industry, or you've been a fan of basketball, or you generally just want a different perspective on your lives. But for now, if you don't have the time to read the whole book from cover to cover, definitely check out the Hall of Fame enshrinement speech from Chris Bosh. That was such a good speech. I'm not exaggerating it. I've probably watched it over 20 or 30 times myself. It's just great, you know, the rhythms, the humor, the stories he picked, the lessons, combined with his own career with so many highs and lows. It's just so genuine to see somebody being open up, talking about all those stuff in front of. Coming up next, we have the How to Prevent the Next Pandemic by Bill Gates. Hello, Bill. I made a video about this book earlier, so if you want to check out the summary of this book, definitely go for it. So I'm going to keep it short for this book. So Goodreads has a 3.69 for this book. My own rating is somewhere between 3 and 4. My motivation around this topic, or why I wanted to read this book, is because you know, I've seen people making comments on you know, the government's or people's reaction to how they react to the pandemic or COVID. But I think a lot of time you're just making comments because you're lacking empathy. You just lack of deep understanding of the topic. You don't know what exactly are the challenges. If you don't have the time to check out the book yourself, definitely go check out the video. Next book I have is The 4-Hour Workweek, Escape the 9 to 5, Live Anywhere, and Join the New Rich by Tim Ferriss. This is actually the second time I read this book. I read it on Kindle, so I don't have the physical version of it with me. But I have mixed feelings about this book. I think this book has a lot of good parts, actually great parts, but I think actually it has a lot of disadvantage, or the part that I don't like as well. Goodreads has a 3.9, somewhere close to 4-star, and my own rating is 3. So the structure of this book, it circles around where a group of people called New Rich in this book, they lead a life where it's contradictory compared to the traditional type of work, like a 9 to 5 type of work. And the author himself also shows up in an image where he only works 4 hours per week and spends the rest of the time, you know, traveling around the world, enjoying the time. And guess what? You know, he's earning way more money than he used to when he was working on a 9 to 5 typical job. You know, the biggest problem I had with this book is that it sets a wrong expectation for the readers. Like, you name it the 4-hour work week, but I don't think anyone is gonna able to walk out from reading this book able to, you know, implement a 4-hour work week's regimen themselves. Like, it's like a clickbait video on YouTube, which is definitely gonna lead to a little bit of disappointment in me. The other aspect of it is that the author feels a certain way, feels like a little bit self-entitled. You know, he definitely has a lot of, you know, unfair advantages of being a white person, being able to, you know, delegate, oversource the majority of his work to very cheap labor, being able to lead a regimen where it doesn't require you to be working on site. I don't think that's realistic for a lot of people in this world, right? Even majority of the people. But I do want to also make sure that I'm being totally fair to this book, because I loved some of the content in this book. You know, I think it definitely does deliver a lot of great tips on how you do time management, how you, especially for things like prioritization, elimination, and you know, automation, to try to build a minimalism work style. So I think those points, the things that I mentioned, I did get so much value from this book. And I think those are some really 5-star content or standpoint. That's something that you can immediately exercise on. So yeah, in general, if you're trying to look out for the ways to improve your work, to be smarter of your work, I would definitely recommend this with you, but don't get your hope too high, because the title is like a wrong expectation. Like I said, on the realistic side of things, I did make a video, somehow incorporated a lot of ideas from this book and mostly combined with my past experience and talking about how I implemented a regimen where how myself work usually around 5 to 6 hours per day. So I would definitely recommend you to check out that video first. That's all of the books that I want to talk about today. One last small announcement. I'm thinking about giving away some books that I mentioned to the subscribers to this channel. You know, I've been making videos for half a year around, and I think I did get a little bit of attention from, you know, so many people that I didn't know. I honestly thought I didn't deserve that much of attention and kindness from every one of you. So I wanted to give something back to all of the supporters. I'll let you know what the rules is and how to deliver the books to you, but before that, subscribe to this channel so you can get notifications for the next coming up videos. So yeah, before that, stay tuned, stay safe, get back to reading. Bye.